Good morning Year 6 and welcome to your first History Home Learning lesson. During this half term in our history lessons we will be studying Viking raiders and invaders. Today's learning objective is to be able to explain when and where the Vikings came from and why they raided Britain. Before we start, I want you to pause this video and think about these questions. Who were the Vikings? Where did they come from? What did they do? When did they come to Britain and why? What else do we know about them? Like I said, pause the video and I'd like you to jot down some little answers in your home learning book and then we'll review them later on and see if you were correct. The Vikings came from the area of the modern Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Norway and Sweden. They set out in boats called longships to go Viking, which means to go travelling around looking for resources and land to claim their own. The Vikings first arrived in Britain around 787 AD. And in 793 AD they raided and pillaged the monastery of Lindisfarne in Northumbria. So we've gone over some new vocabulary there. Longship is a long wooden narrow boat used by Vikings. Pillage means to steal goods using violent tactics. And raid is to suddenly attack a place. Now you can see a map of the journey that the Vikings would have taken on their longboats and where they would have landed. The Vikings came to Britain looking for lucrative new items to steal and trade. In addition, they wanted land that they could take and claim as their own. They particularly liked to raid monasteries, like the one in Lindisfarne. The monasteries were not very well protected and contained valuable goods like gold and jewels, imported foods and other useful materials. The Vikings also stole manuscripts and Bibles. They were sold back to the religious leaders who could not bear to see them lost or damaged. The Vikings went on to invade Scotland and in time they began to settle and stay there. They were able to build up an army and in 866 AD they captured the city of York. The Anglo-Saxon king Alfred the Great, who became King of Wessex in 871 AD, managed to force the Vikings out of the south of England, but this was short-lived. By 878 AD, the Vikings had settled permanently in England, overran Wessex and forced King Alfred into hiding. The Vikings were here to stay. We're going to have a look at the Viking timeline. Make sure you make notes in your home learning book as we go through this, as this may come in handy later on. In 787 AD, the Vikings first arrive in Britain. They arrived from Norway, Sweden and Denmark and travelled to England, Scotland and Ireland. In 787 AD, the Vikings attack from Norway. They attacked the monastery in Lindisfarne in Northumbria. The following year, they attacked northern Britain, in what we now call Scotland. In 866 AD, the Vikings capture the city of York. In 870 AD, Wessex is the last Anglo-Saxon kingdom. In 871 AD, Alfred the Great becomes King of Wessex. He drives the invading Vikings from the south, but they stay in the north and the east. In 878 AD, by this time, the Vikings had settled permanently in England, overrun Wessex, and forced King Alfred into hiding. In 886 AD, King Alfred agrees to a treaty with the Vikings. Alfred keeps the west, and the Vikings are given the east, which is later known as Danelaw. In 900 AD, the Vikings establish rule over Scotland. In 954 AD, the last Viking king of Jorvik or York, Eric Bloodaxe, is forced out of York. In 1013 AD, King Sven of Denmark and his son Canute sail up the river Humber and Trent to claim the throne in Daneland, and Ethelred, the Saxon king, flees abroad. In 1014 AD, King Sven dies and Ethelred returns to England to rule again. In 1016 AD, King Ethelred dies. His son Edmund Ironside becomes king for a few months until he also dies. Canute becomes king of the Danes and king of England. In 1035 AD, King Canute dies. His son Harold Harefoot and Hardicanute share the rule of England. Harold dies in 1040, and Hardicanute becomes the sole ruler of England. In 1042 AD, Ethelred's son Edward III is invited to return from Normandy to become King of England. Edward III was better known as Edward the Confessor due to his extreme piety. In 1066 AD, the last Anglo-Saxon king, King Harold, is defeated by William the Conqueror at the Battle of Hastings, and Norman Britain begins. Here's today's main task. Your challenge is to create your own Viking timeline to help you remember and order the important facts about the Vikings. If you look at the Year 6 home learning page, you can look at the timeline poster to help you if you get stuck. You can also go back through this video. You should have also made notes. All of these can help you make your own timeline poster today. Well done again, Year 6. That's another great lesson. See you tomorrow for your next home learning lesson.